Boston's winter was harsher than usual. From the window of a hospital room overlooking the snow-covered cityscape, Elizabeth Monroe finished her final suture. The heart transplant surgery had lasted 8 hours, but the patient's condition was stable. She blinked her tired eyes and left the operating room. "That was an amazing surgery," a young resident rushed up to her. "Your technique is truly remarkable. Someday I hope to become a surgeon like you." Elizabeth smiled and nodded. She had established herself as the most skilled cardiac surgeon at St. Mary Memorial Hospital. 10 years of relentless effort and dedication had paid off, earning her respect from many colleagues and junior doctors. "Thank you, Jessica. I'm sure you can do it," Elizabeth replied kindly. She finished her final rounds and headed to the changing room. When she took her smartphone from her locker, she noticed several missed calls. One was from the senior care facility, and another from her mother. With a deep sigh, she opened the message from her mother. "Don't forget about the family gathering today. 6 o'clock. It's your birthday, after all." Elizabeth put her hand to her forehead. Today was her birthday. She had completely forgotten it, absorbed in her work. But her reluctance to attend that celebration wasn't just because of her busy schedule. Elizabeth had grown up in a wealthy family in the Boston suburbs. Her father, Robert, was known as a real estate mogul, and Monroe Properties was one of the most successful real estate companies in the city. Her mother, Carol, a former debutante, now managed high society charity events. And her sister, Vanessa, basking in her father's adoration, was pursuing a career as a model. Though they appeared to be a perfect family on the surface, family gatherings were always tense occasions for Elizabeth. Her choice to pursue medicine was consistently undervalued in a family that prized art and fashion. For her parents, real success meant social status and physical beauty, not saving patients' lives. "Elizabeth, you're always reading books. Look at Vanessa, she already has bookings for 3 fashion shows." This was something her mother often said during her teenage years. Elizabeth had earned a scholarship to medical school and graduated at the top of her class. Yet every time she returned home, all she heard were stories of her sister's latest achievements. Elizabeth's only supporter was her maternal grandmother, Martha. A former nurse, Martha fully backed her granddaughter's passion for medicine. "You have a special gift, Elizabeth," Martha would always say. "You'll save many lives with those hands. That's a gift from God." Before getting into her car, Elizabeth checked the call from the senior care facility. Martha's condition had been unstable lately. Elizabeth visited once a week and planned to stop by today as well. "This is Dr. Monroe. How is my grandmother, Martha Williams, doing?" "She's doing fine, doctor," the facility staff answered. "She's been looking forward to your visit since this morning. She mentioned having a special present for you." Elizabeth smiled. "I understand, thank you. I'll be there soon." As she drove, Elizabeth thought about the birthday party at her parents' house. Her mother would surely prepare a perfect dinner, and her father would open an expensive wine. But the conversation would undoubtedly center around Vanessa's latest photo shoot and the celebrities she'd met. And inevitably, her parents would inquire about Elizabeth's financial situation. "You make enough money as a doctor, you should support Vanessa's career. We spent a fortune raising you. Just think about your college expenses." Elizabeth gripped the steering wheel tightly. She had been living in her own apartment and was completely financially independent for over 10 years. Still, her parents constantly mentioned her duty and repayment, as if her life was merely a return on their investment. Upon arriving at the senior care facility, Elizabeth's expression softened. Here, she could be herself, both as a doctor and as a granddaughter. When she knocked on Martha's door, a weak but warm voice answered. "Come in, Elizabeth." At 85, Martha sat on her bed. Her white hair was neatly tied back, and her blue eyes shone with a sharpness that belied her age. As Elizabeth approached, Martha opened her arms. "Happy birthday, my precious granddaughter." Elizabeth gently embraced Martha. "Thank you, Grandma." Martha took a small box from her bedside table. "This is a special gift for you." "Don't open it now," she said, looking into Elizabeth's eyes with a serious expression. "Open it when the time is right. It will help you understand the true meaning of family." Elizabeth accepted the box with curiosity. "What do you mean? Did something happen?" Martha smiled. "Life is unpredictable. This might be the last lesson I can teach you." She coughed. "How about the party tonight? Are you looking forward to it?" Elizabeth answered honestly. "To be honest, I'm not eager to go. As usual, it'll be all about my sister, and nobody wants to hear about my work." Martha took her granddaughter's hand. "Elizabeth, you've grown into a wonderful woman. Not just with your talent as a doctor, but with your compassionate heart. Never doubt your worth." "I'm so glad I have you, Grandma," Elizabeth said. "You're the only one who truly understands me." A momentary sadness crossed Martha's face, but it quickly changed to a smile. "Now, go. Your mother will be angry if you're late." Elizabeth received one more embrace from her grandmother and put the small box in her bag. As she left the facility, she felt an inexplicable anxiety in her chest. On her way to her parents' mansion, Elizabeth's phone rang. It was from the hospital. "Dr. Monroe, I'm sorry to bother you. The patient from earlier has become somewhat unstable. Could you come check on them?" "I'll be right there," Elizabeth answered immediately. She called her parents to let them know she would be late. Although she could hear clear displeasure in her mother's voice, Elizabeth didn't mind. The patient's life came first. As dusk approached, Elizabeth finally arrived at her parents' house. Passing through the elaborate gates and up the stone driveway, she was met by the imposing door. Taking a deep breath, she rang the doorbell. The door opened, and Carol appeared. "Finally, you've arrived," she said in a stern tone. "Everyone is waiting." Elizabeth nodded quietly and entered the house. In the living room, under the grand chandelier, her parents and sister were already seated. The table was set with expensive white porcelain dishware, and the soft light from candelabras illuminated the room. However, what caught her eye was a white envelope placed on the table. There was no birthday cake or wrapped presents in sight. "So you've finally come," Carol said coldly. "Sit down." Elizabeth quietly took her seat. Her father, Robert, was pouring expensive wine and didn't even look at her. Her sister, Vanessa, checked her smartphone and gave Elizabeth a meaningful glance with a slight smile. "Happy birthday, Elizabeth," Robert finally looked at her after filling the last glass. "Now, as proof that you've become an adult, here's an important document." Carol pointed to the white envelope in front of Elizabeth. "Open it." Tension filled the room. Elizabeth reached for the envelope and opened it. Inside was an official document with a notary seal. The title read, "Family Relationship Termination Notice." "What is this?" Elizabeth asked in confusion. Looking up from the document, she was met with Carol's cold smile. "From today, you are no longer part of our family," Carol said with a thin smile. Simple, isn't it? Elizabeth looked at the document in disbelief. It listed legal terms and clauses. It formally dissolved the family relationship and demanded repayment for child-rearing costs, college expenses, and all other investments made in her. It even included a clause prohibiting any future family gatherings or contacts. The total amount was specified as $450,000. "What does this mean?" Elizabeth's voice trembled. "Did something happen? Did I do something?" "Nothing happened," Carol answered calmly. It's simply a business decision. You're an adult now, a successful doctor. We want to focus on Vanessa's career. Robert took a sip of wine and smirked. As a doctor, you can afford it, right? We made a substantial investment in raising you. Now we want returns. Vanessa remained silent, but her eyes revealed clear satisfaction. Elizabeth read through the document with shaking hands. It seemed so unreal, like a nightmare. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "It will help you understand the true meaning of family." Why? Elizabeth finally spoke. I've always tried hard. Tried to be a good daughter. You've always been a child who never met our expectations, Carol said coldly. The path you chose wasn't what we wanted. Vanessa is different. She's our true daughter. That's enough talk. Robert stood up and pointed to the last page of the document. Sign here. The due date is 1 month from now. Total amount, $450,000. We prefer a lump sum payment. Elizabeth stared at the document for a long time. Something changed within her. The sense of rejection, of never being enough, that she had felt since childhood, it had all been true. She slowly stood up, showing no tears, and took the document. I understand, her voice had regained its composure. I thought we were family, but it seems we were in a business relationship. So this is the end. Elizabeth folded the document and put it in her bag. Carol and Robert watched with triumphant expressions, while Vanessa looked surprised. As Elizabeth silently left the room, she heard Vanessa's mocking voice behind her. Oh, aren't you staying for dinner? Elizabeth didn't look back. As she left the mansion, her heart felt strangely calm. Getting into her car and starting the engine, she changed her plans and headed to the senior care facility where her grandmother was. When she entered Martha's room, her grandmother seemed to understand everything just by looking at her expression. What happened, Elizabeth? At her grandmother's gentle question, Elizabeth finally let her emotions pour out like a broken dam. She told her everything about the family relationship termination notice. Martha listened quietly to her granddaughter's story and gently held her hand. Elizabeth, I've always known how they treated you. Her grandmother pointed to the small box she had given Elizabeth earlier. This is my will. Don't open it now. Open it after I'm gone. You're never alone. You'll understand what true family means. Elizabeth buried her face in her grandmother's chest. Martha gently stroked her hair. 2 months passed. Boston was beginning to feel the arrival of spring, with new green buds on the street trees. Elizabeth tried to heal her emotional wounds by immersing herself in work. She had completely cut off contact with her parents and was dealing with the document through a lawyer. Martha remained her only emotional support, with whom she spoke on the phone several times a week and occasionally visited after work. One evening after completing a difficult surgery, Elizabeth's smartphone vibrated in her pocket. Normally she would turn it off during surgery, but because Martha's health had been declining, she had left it on vibrate today. Stepping into the hallway to check the screen, she found 5 missed calls from the senior care facility. Her heart began to race. This is St. Bernard Senior Care Center. Martha Williams has taken a turn for the worse and has been rushed to Boston General Hospital, the facility staff informed her of the emergency. She's conscious, but her condition is unstable. Elizabeth entrusted the post-surgery report to a colleague and immediately headed to the hospital. The fact that Martha had been taken to Boston General Hospital rather than St. Mary Memorial Hospital where Elizabeth worked spoke to the urgency of the situation. When she rushed to her grandmother's side, even her usual calm as a doctor was shaken. It's a stroke, the attending physician explained. There's significant damage, and we've already begun treatment, but considering her age, the situation is, frankly, difficult. With her medical knowledge, Elizabeth understood the severity of her grandmother's condition. But right now, she wanted to be by her grandmother's side as a granddaughter. She entered Martha's room and took the frail hand of her grandmother lying weakly in bed. "Grandma, it's me, Elizabeth," she said with a trembling voice. Martha slowly opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "Elizabeth, you came," her voice was weak, but her eyes were still full of love. "Of course. You've always been there for me," Elizabeth answered, fighting back tears. "You'll get better, I promise. I'm here for you." Martha weakly shook her head. "My time is running out. As a doctor, you must know this." Elizabeth cried as she gripped her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, if you leave me, I'll truly be alone." "No, you're not alone," Martha's voice was weak, but her words were powerful. "Don't forget my will. It will help you understand the true meaning of family." Martha left Elizabeth with her final words. "True family isn't bound by blood, but by love and respect. I'll always be watching over you." 3 days later, just after Elizabeth returned home from the hospital, the phone rang. Martha had passed away peacefully. Elizabeth put down the phone, sat in her apartment's living room, and cried for hours. In her heart, there was no one left she could call true family. The day of the funeral was sunny. Elizabeth, dressed in black mourning clothes, sat in the front row of the church. She spoke about her memories with her grandmother, and the unconditional love Martha had given her throughout her journey to become a doctor. Her words touched the hearts of those present, and many wiped away tears. As Elizabeth returned to her seat, her gaze caught 3 figures sitting at the back of the church. It was her parents and sister. Though dressed in mourning attire, their expressions seemed more like they had some other purpose than grieving. She looked away and focused on saying her final goodbye to her grandmother. After the funeral, as attendees began to leave, an unfamiliar man approached Elizabeth. "Dr. Monroe, my condolences. I'm Joseph Harrison, Mrs. Williams' attorney," he offered his business card. "Mrs. Williams instructed me to deliver her will to you directly." He handed Elizabeth a leather document cover. "This is a copy of the official will. I'll contact you again later regarding the details." As Elizabeth accepted the documents, a voice spoke from behind her. "Elizabeth." Turning around, she saw her father, Robert. His expression was stern and cold. "Let's hear about Martha's will." "I don't want to discuss this now," Elizabeth replied with a resolute attitude. "I've just lost my grandmother. That old woman must have had considerable assets." Robert's voice was low and suppressed. "We have legitimate rights as family." Elizabeth contained her anger and said, "Am I not already excluded from the family? Have you forgotten the family relationship termination notice you created?" Carol and Vanessa approached as well. "Elizabeth, you were involved in Martha's care, weren't you?" Carol's voice had a hypocritical sweetness. "Did she say anything before she passed away?" Elizabeth looked at the 3 of them and made a firm decision in her heart. "Goodbye," she said only that and left the church. Back in her apartment, Elizabeth took out the small box her grandmother had entrusted to her. Inside were an envelope, her grandmother's diary, and an old locket. On the envelope, in her grandmother's handwriting, was written, "Open this when you discover the true meaning of family." Looking at the envelope, Elizabeth felt it wasn't time yet. She opened the diary and began reading the first page. It contained her grandmother's memories from her younger days, the joys and sorrows of life, and deep affection for Elizabeth. 10 months after Martha's death, Boston welcomed winter again, and the city was covered in snow. Elizabeth's life had changed gradually but surely. After her grandmother's death, while carrying her grief, she was determined to move forward and devoted even more passion to her career as a doctor. She had successfully performed numerous difficult heart transplant surgeries, further elevating her reputation in the medical field. Meanwhile, unknown to Elizabeth, dark clouds had gathered over the Monroe family. Due to a nationwide economic crisis, Robert's real estate business had taken a severe hit. His investments in high-end properties had backfired, leaving his company with enormous debt and his mansion at risk of foreclosure. Vanessa's modeling career hadn't progressed as she had hoped, and she faced repeated rejections at auditions. Elizabeth occasionally read her grandmother's diary. The unexpected truth revealed there, that she was actually adopted, initially shocked her, but eventually, she understood how it explained many things: the sense of alienation she had felt since childhood, her parents' cold attitude, and the unconditional love shown only by her grandmother. Elizabeth's birth parents were Margaret Clark and her husband John, who had been Martha's close friends. They died young in an accident, and Elizabeth was taken in by Carol and Robert when she was 6 months old. It was Margaret's dying wish, but they never truly loved her as their own child. Knowing this, Martha had always protected and supported Elizabeth. One snowy evening, as Elizabeth was finishing her shift, an emergency patient was brought in. With severe myocardial infarction, the patient needed immediate surgery. As preparations were underway, she stopped in her tracks when she heard the patient's name, Carol Monroe. "She's my mother," Elizabeth quietly told her colleague. "Can someone else handle this?" However, in the night emergency system, there was no other cardiac surgeon with Elizabeth's skills. Despite her conflicted feelings, she decided to first check on her mother's condition, fulfilling her duty as a doctor. Entering the ICU, she found an exhausted Robert and a disheveled Vanessa, without makeup, waiting. The two looked at Elizabeth with startled eyes. "Elizabeth, why are you here?" Robert asked in confusion. "I'm a cardiac surgeon at this hospital. I came to check on Mother's condition," Elizabeth answered calmly. Her sense of responsibility as a doctor overrode her personal feelings. "How is she?" "Very serious," Robert's face turned pale. "She's been complaining of chest pain since yesterday, but He stumbled over his words. "We can't afford medical expenses right now. Our insurance has lapsed." Elizabeth was surprised. She never imagined the Monroe family would fall into financial difficulties. "The company went bankrupt," Vanessa said in a small voice. She no longer appeared to be the haughty sister of before, but rather a tired young woman. "We're about to lose the house, and I don't know what to do anymore." Elizabeth understood their dire situation. Something moved in her heart. At this moment, she decided for the first time to open her grandmother's envelope. "I'll prepare for Mother's surgery. I'll assemble the best cardiac surgical team," she said and left the room. That night, Carol's emergency surgery was performed by another doctor. Elizabeth had assembled the surgical team but avoided taking the scalpel herself. It was a professional decision as a doctor. However, she remained in the operating room throughout, watching over the entire process. After the surgery was successfully completed and Carol was moved to the recovery room, Elizabeth returned home. She took out the envelope marked "Open this when you discover the true meaning of family," from the small box inherited from her grandmother. She felt it was time. The contents of the envelope were something she never imagined. Martha had possessed enormous wealth and had left everything to Elizabeth. The assets included a luxury apartment, multiple investment accounts, and, most valuable of all, a charitable foundation. Additionally, there were detailed records of the funds Robert and Carol had received for Elizabeth's upbringing. Martha had provided Elizabeth's parents with more than enough money for her upbringing and education. $450,000. Elizabeth clutched the documents with trembling hands. The amount her parents had demanded from her matched exactly what Martha had already paid them. In fact, Martha had provided them with even more funds, as recorded. The next morning, Elizabeth returned to the hospital and checked on Carol's condition in the ICU. The surgery had been successful, and she was stable. Robert and Vanessa were sleeping by her bedside. Elizabeth observed them quietly. The once wealthy and arrogant family now seemed weak and fragile. She waited in the hallway for them to wake up. When Robert was the first to come out of the room, he looked at Elizabeth with surprise. "Carol's condition is stable," Elizabeth said in her doctor's tone. "However, recovery will take time." "Thank you." Robert stumbled over his words. "Without you." Elizabeth interrupted him and took out documents from her bag. "I read grandmother's will," she said quietly. "The $450,000 you demanded from me, grandmother had already paid that amount to you. And even more." Robert looked at her in shock. "Martha. And I was adopted, wasn't I?" Elizabeth continued. "You kept it hidden, and then tried to discard me with a family relationship termination notice." By this time, Vanessa had also come into the hallway and was listening to their conversation. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know," Vanessa said with a trembling voice. "I really didn't know, Elizabeth." Elizabeth glanced at Vanessa for a moment, then turned back to Robert. Calmly, she made her decision. "I will pay for Mother's surgery and future treatment costs," she said. "I'll cover everything, but there's a condition." Elizabeth took out another document from her bag. It was a family reconstruction contract that she had created herself. It outlined the conditions for paying Carol's treatment costs, and the acknowledgement and apology for the unfair treatment Elizabeth had received from her parents. "Why help us?" Robert asked with a confused look. "We hurt you." "Grandmother taught me," Elizabeth answered quietly. "What true family means. It's not about blood relations, but about love, respect, and forgiveness." At her words, Robert bowed his head. For the first time, a color of genuine regret appeared on his face. "Elizabeth." Carol's weak voice came from the hospital room. She had awakened and seemed to have heard part of the conversation. "You are truly our daughter. We just didn't realize it." Elizabeth just shook her head. "I am Martha's granddaughter. And from now on, I'll choose my own family." She quietly walked away down the corridor. From the hospital's large windows, she could see Boston's snow-covered landscape. Elizabeth took a deep breath. In her mind, her grandmother's words echoed, "True strength lies in a heart that can forgive." One day, a year later, Elizabeth stood in front of a new building in downtown Boston. A plaque bearing the inscription "Martha Williams Heart Medical Center" shone on the front of the building. Using her grandmother's inheritance, she had established a charitable foundation for heart patients who couldn't afford treatment for financial reasons. Today was the opening ceremony. "It's a beautiful building, Elizabeth." Turning around, she saw Carol standing there. Recovered from surgery, she was thinner than before, with new wrinkles on her face, but in her eyes was a humility Elizabeth had never seen before. "Thank you, Mother," Elizabeth replied quietly. She still felt resistance to calling her Mom, and chose a more formal address. Carol took a deep breath. "Every day, I'm reminded of my foolishness. But you gave me a new life." She now worked as a volunteer at the foundation. She listened to patients and their families, helping to ease their anxieties. It was a time of atonement, but also the first meaningful work she had ever found. Robert couldn't recover from bankruptcy and had fallen into a deep depression. Drowning in alcohol, he had entered a rehabilitation facility at Elizabeth's urging. He was still on the road to recovery, but small progress was beginning to show. During last week's visitation day, he had said to Elizabeth, "I lost everything, but my daughter picked up what I had thrown away." Those words had none of his former arrogance. Just an honest confession from a broken man. Vanessa had changed the most. Giving up her dream of modeling, she had enrolled in nursing school at Elizabeth's suggestion. Today, she had arrived early to help with the opening ceremony. "Sis, everything's ready for the podium," Vanessa called to Elizabeth. On her face was not the jealousy or competitiveness of the past, but a genuine respect. "Seeing your strength, I finally understood what true success means," Vanessa had confided recently. "I want to become someone who helps others too." After the ceremony ended in the evening, Elizabeth invited the three to her new suburban home. Purchased with her grandmother's inheritance, this house was filled with warmth and gentleness. On the dining table were a photo of her grandmother and the locket, and a fire burned in the fireplace. "Let's toast," Elizabeth raised her wine glass. "To new beginnings." The three nodded quietly and clinked their glasses. "Complete forgiveness takes time," Elizabeth said. "But perhaps we can become a new kind of family. Not one bound by blood, but one formed by choice." In their eyes shone tears of regret, hope, and gratitude. After dinner, Elizabeth went out to the garden alone. Looking up at the starry night sky, she opened the locket. In it, she had newly inscribed her grandmother's words, "True family is chosen by the heart." Elizabeth smiled. She had found her path. And now, even those who had once hurt her were confronting their mistakes and beginning the long journey to become a true family in the real sense. It was the beginning of a new bond, bound not merely by blood, but by love, respect, and forgiveness.